So if you take an anatomy and phys or bio 181, which are sort of the recommended classes to take before this, you would have talked a whole unit on metabolism. And that's basically all the chemical reactions that occur in the body. So that could be breaking down substances, so in the process of digestion. Synthesizing more complex substances, so you could be taking small amino acids and building a protein, and if you remember in 156 or 181, you talk about a little bit of amino acids and they started to come together and build to become something bigger, a protein. So what that means is you eat protein and you turn those proteins into other proteins to help your muscles or your brain or your digestive system. So you're converting one thing into another. And if you've taken the class with me, you know that I talk about amino acids kind of like Lego, and that when you take something in like a protein, which is just some structure built out of Lego, let's say, and you break it down in your stomach, your small intestines, you can take it into cells, those little Lego pieces, and rebuild something brand new. And that's basically what protein is, and amino acids. Protein would be the structure, amino acids would be the Lego pieces in my example. Using nutrients and oxygen to synthesize energy. If you remember metabolism, we talked about how oxygen comes into the cell to help make a bunch of ATP. And ATP was the unit of energy that is transportable and makes cells work. Without ATP, or if you have low ATP, your cells do this thing where they start to kind of starve and they have issues, especially without oxygen. If you remember, without oxygen, it's called aerobic respiration, and a version of that in your body that occurs is like lactic acid burn, where you don't get oxygen to those muscles, and it basically starts to hurt because you're producing an acid that's killing cells. But homeostasis is what we're really going to focus in on. Homeostasis is the body's ability to maintain a stable internal environment. Homeo means same, or homeo means same. Stasis is to stay. And we do homeostasis for so many different things. If you think about it, we talked about this one already in one of our examples. Temperature. Gets too hot, you sweat to cool yourself down. Gets too cold, you shiver to bring the temperature back up. But when you take Bio 202, or the second half of this class, you'll learn that the whole semester from start to finish is all about homeostasis and how it works. That's all we're going to talk about in that class. Homeostasis is a dynamic equilibrium, which means that there's internal conditions which occur that have to be at a narrow set point. So a couple of them that I can think about, I keep beating up on this one, is temperature. So 37 degrees, we're actually 36.8 to 37.3. Anything that goes above that, we're going to start to sweat. Anything below that, we're going to shiver. But we can use this example for anything. We can use it for water levels. If we have too much water, we're going to excrete it as urine. If we have too little, we're going to keep it inside of our body. You'll probably notice that in the summer you don't urinate as much as you do in the winter, and it's because in the summer we're turning a lot of that water into sweat, or we're trying to keep our eyes wet, and that's going to constantly take a lot of water from the environment. So if you're not drinking enough water, your eyes get dry and itchy and things like that, and that's all because of homeostasis. You're trying to keep everything stable, but then when you don't, we have to start figuring out, well, what can we not give water to? We could do homeostasis with so many other things. I can go through, well, let's put it this way. Bio 202 is all about homeostasis, and we could probably make that course into a 3-year course and still not cover everything. Homeostasis, it keeps our body optimal conditions for protein function. These things to function have to be in a narrow range. So Temperature has to be really narrow for our proteins to work. pH has to be narrow for our pH to work, and blood chemistry, just how much acids and free radicals and things, all of that has to be in this really tight, narrow range for proteins and enzymes to work. And if you move out of that tight range, well, it stops working, and if you move out of it for too long, you die. So here's an example. You go ahead and you have a patient that's arm was amputated just seconds ago, and their blood is draining out. What's happening now is that their body, they're starting to die, and if the blood gets too low, they die. Why did the patient die? Did the patient die because there wasn't enough blood? No. They died because when you open and close your lungs, you're actually oxygenating your blood. And you're moving that oxygen through your body, through your arteries and veins, to all your cells. And because all of your cells aren't getting oxygen anymore, they start to shut down and have problems. Also, they can't get rid of waste, so they're starting to become really acidic. And if there's too much acid in the cells, they kind of die and have a problem. All these things are going to cause proteins to shut down, your brain to shut down, oxygen levels, CO2 levels will come really high, and that's why the patient dies. So blood, even though we think, yeah, you need enough blood or you die, really it's what the blood does is what's going to cause the person to die. And we'll talk way more about this, so please don't think you needed to know that before this lecture. So proteins exposed to conditions outside of homeostasis become denatured. And denature means that they lose their functionality. We'll talk a little more about that in a second. Homeostatic imbalance results in disease, illness, any disorders, definitely death. Why is homeostasis so important? If you look on the left, this is going to be a properly folded protein. And on the right is going to be a protein that's become denatured or unwound. And proteins are made of amino acids, and they have a certain charge and a certain shape to function. And any time that you change that shape or function, that's going to make them not work anymore. And you kind of know this. When you cook foods before what it looks like and after what it looks like, you've denatured it with heat or pH or something. Heat with that egg, before you denature it or add heat, it basically looks one way. You add some heat, it completely changes, and you can't reverse it. You can only see what happens to it. We cook foods because we want to denature the harmful things that are in it. So for instance, if we look at this egg, we know that by eating it raw, we're going to get sick because there's salmonella, there's a whole bunch of bacteria in it, stuff that shouldn't really be in us. But when you treat it by either cooking it, or if you stick it in a blender with a bunch of like juice with low pH, you're going to kill some stuff, and that makes it safe to eat this way. So you're basically taking those harmful, so let me go back one, those harmful proteins and denaturing them so they can't work anymore. So let's say on the left were a protein that was in salmonella, and left on its own, when it gets inside of you, it's going to make you horribly sick. You then go ahead and cook it, and it looks like the one on the right. Now, when it gets inside your body, it can't do anything. It can't function correctly. So there's no way it can hurt you or kill you. Same thing with meat. If I take that meat on the left and put electrodes on it and hit it with some shock, it'll actually pulse and move the way it's supposed to. But when you cook it, like on below, because I've hit it with heat, that's definitely going to make it not function anymore. Acid does the same thing. If you've ever had ceviche, ceviche is basically a fish that you've put in some acid, and the acid itself cooks it and denatures that protein. You can also do denaturing with a couple other ways. You could do temperature, pH, or just changing the salt in something. That's the other way you can do changing of it. How's homeostasis maintained? I'm actually going to go ahead and, let's see. I'll just finish off the slide. must be able to sense the environment. So there's going to be a receptor that basically senses any change. So I'm going to be a receptor that's specific for temperature, and I'm going to be in the neural cells. When it goes too high, basically what's going to happen is it's going to send a signal to an integrator, which is your brain, and then an effect has to occur. So there's going to be some cells that are going to have to move or do something in response to that receptor cell, that effect. So in my example, receptor cell, you just found out you're too hot. It's going to go to the brain, it's going to go to your cells, tell it too hot. You're going to have certain glands in your skin that are going to start to secrete water, and that's going to make you sweat, and now you're going to cool yourself down.